He says, Marxism comes to the world as an historical fact, and it comes in a cultural nexus. If, for instance, Africans, or let us go back to Asians, when the Chinese first picked up the Marxist texts, they were European texts. They came loaded with conceptions of the historical development of Europe itself. So that method and factual data were obviously interwoven, and conclusions were in fact in a specific historical and cultural setting. It was the task of the Chinese to deal with that and to adapt it and to scrutinize it and see how it was applicable to their society. First and foremost, to be scientific, it meant having due regard for the specifics of Chinese historical and social development. I have already cited Cabral in another text, and he reappears in this context. The way in which he is at all times looking at the particularities of class development in contemporary Guinea-Bissau, looking at the potential of classes in Guinea-Bissau at this point in time. And therefore, he is, of course, making sure that Marxism does not simply appear as the summation of other people's history, but appears as a living force within one's history. And this is a difficult transformation. This is a task of anybody who considers himself or herself a Marxist. However, because it is fraught with so many difficulties and obstacles, many people take the easy route, which is to take it as a finished product rather than ongoing social product which has to be adapted to their own society. One finds that in looking at Marxist theory, at its relevance to race, looking at the relevance of Marxist theory to national emancipation, we come up with a very important paradox. And it is this, that the nationalist in the strict sense of the word, that is the petty bourgeois nationalist, who aims merely at the recovery of national independence in our epoch, is incapable of giving the people of Africa or the peoples of the Caribbean any participation in liberal democracy. The petty bourgeois cannot fulfill these historical tasks, for national liberation requires a socialist ideology. We cannot separate the two. Even for national liberation in Africa, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique very clearly demonstrated the necessity for an ideological development, for conscientization, as they say in Latin America, and the nationalist struggle was won because it came under the rubric of scientific socialist perspective. As Cabral said, there may be revolutions which have had a revolutionary theory and which have failed, but there has certainly been no revolution which has succeeded without a revolutionary theory. Marxism is indeed a living science, and that was the end of the quote. Marxism is indeed a living science, not a dogma. And any so-called revolutionary organizations who don't adhere to the science of change, the dialectics will make important mistakes. We see them now. Organizations that don't understand the dividing line in the world today, the primary contradiction that exists internationally between the imperialist world and the oppressed world, the great mass of humanity. We see some of these organizations who attack countries like Libya and Syria, giving pretext to imperialist war from the left instead of honing in on imperialism and their propaganda and defending the countries against attack. The U.S. and the Western world does not attack those countries because of mistakes of the leadership, but because of the political role they play that doesn't make them client states, and because they dare operate with a shred of independence and oppose the interests of the imperialists. While Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Trotsky were Europeans and white, they were internationalists, and it is their development of revolutionary theory that poses the greatest threat to the system of capitalism. Indeed, social revolution is the only answer. But what are the theoretical and practical contributions of revolutionaries from the oppressed world? It is this we hope to illuminate. As I said, Marxism is a living science and a guide for which to examine and interpret phenomena, but not every place developed in the same way. Not every country passed through every stage of development. It is illustrated in Engels' private property and a family. Many were interrupted by colonialism, but history does not begin for the oppressed with colonialism. So we look to the leaders from around the world who have contributed to the science and examined their countries based on their historical development and internal contradictions, and it is the leaders from the oppressed world who have been at the forefront of social revolutions, from Mao to Ho Chi Minh to Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Nkrumah, Fidel, and many others. This is our first class in the series, and so we will begin with Africa and with a presentation from our dear comrade Deirdre on a little known and little studied Ethiopian revolution. So welcome, Deirdre.